pawn e2, e4, pawn c7, c5, knight g1, f3, knight b8, c6, pawn d2, d4, pawn c5 takes pawn d4, knight f3 takes pawn d4, pawn e7, e6, knight b1, c3, pawn d7, d6, bishop c1, e3, knight g8, f6, pawn f2, f4, bishop f8, e7, queen d1, f3, castles kingside, castles queenside, queen d8, c7, knight d4, b5, queen c7, b8, pawn g2, g4, knight f6 takes pawn g4, pawn a7, a6, knight b5, d4, knight c6 takes knight d4, bishop e3 takes knight d4, pawn b7, b5, pawn g4, g5, knight f6, d7, bishop f1, d3, pawn b5, b4, knight c3, d5, pawn e6 takes knight d5, pawn e4 takes pawn d5,
The piece sacrifice is a positional one, since it has been used to erect an invisible barrier on the e-file. A number of squares on it, e5 and e6, are controlled by white pawns, and a white rook will soon be moved to e1. Yakov Damsky.
pawn f7, f5, rook d1, e1, rook f8, f7, pawn h2, h4, bishop c8, b7, bishop d3 takes pawn f5, rook f7 takes bishop f5, rook e1 takes bishop e7, knight d7, e5. Queen f3, e4. Queen b8, f8. Pawn f4 takes knight e5. Rook f5, f4. Queen e4, e3. Rook f4, f3. Queen e3, e2. Queen f8 takes rook e7. Queen e2 takes rook f3. Pawn d6 takes pawn e5. Rook h1, e1. Rook a8, d8. Rook e1 takes pawn e5. Queen e7, d6. Queen f3, f4.
Exclamation mark. With this simple tactic 29. Bishop takes d5 30. Rook e8 check. White keeps his 2 extra pawns. The finish is straightforward. Damski.
Rook d8, f8. Queen f4, e4. Pawn b4, b3. Pawn a2 takes pawn b3. Rook f8, f1. King c1, d2. Queen d6, b4. Queen b4, d6. Bishop d4, c5. Queen d6 takes bishop c5. Rook e5, e8. Rook f1, f8. Queen e4, e6. King g8, h8. Queen e6, f7.
After this move, Black resigned.